Merci beaucoup Mia et merci Olivier pour les traductions. Claudia Rankine est l'autrice de 5 livres de poésie, dont Citizen, an American Lyric, et Don't Let Me Be Lonely, an American Lyric, de 3 pièces de théâtre, dont Help, créée en mars 2020 à New York, et The White Card, créée en février 2018 et publiée par Grey Wolf Press en 2019, ainsi que de nombreuses collaborations vidéo sous le titre Situation. Son dernier volume d'essais, Just Us, An American Conversation, a été publié par Grey Wolf Press en 2020. Elle est également coéditrice de plusieurs anthologies, dont The Racial Imaginary, Writers on Race in the Life of the Mind. Et en 2016, elle a cofondé le Racial Imaginary Institute. Son travail a reçu de nombreux prix. Elle est lauréate des bourses de la Fondation Guggenheim, de la Fondation Lannan, de la Fondation MacArthur et du National Endowment of the Arts. Ancienne chancelière de l'Academy of American Poets, Claudia Rankine a rejoint le programme d'écriture créative de l'Université de New York à l'automne 2021. Elle vit à New York et actuellement à Berlin, où elle a été co-commissaire de l'exposition For Real à la DAD. Elle est en train d'achever un nouveau livre sous le titre Triage, dont elle va nous lire, je crois, la fin ce soir. Elle avait lu le début l'année dernière, en 2024, quand elle nous avait fait le plaisir de lire pour nous. Claudia.
Bonsoir. That's all the French you get. I'm going to read from the beginning section of my new book, and then I will. Okay, that's perfect. And then we'll read the very end. If you are human, you might give yourself gifts. Some of us mark the years like that. As a result, it was not long before my 60th birthday that I purchased a ticket and attended a lecture by an old friend. Under a spotlight positioned to illuminate their angular face, the theorists stood at a podium centered on a vast stage. I hadn't seen them in years, and the familiarity of their gestures and voice eased me. During the Q&A, someone asked them how they felt given what's going on in the world. All was quiet. Sometimes I want to throw myself in front of a speeding car, the theorist replied, with a disarmingly pained smile. That got everyone's attention. Sitting in the audience, I experienced the theorist's wish for a collapse as something like homesickness, seated with the Greek algos, an intense suffering for a return. But a return to whom or what? We are always wanting to go back, or waiting for someone or something to come. But sometimes reality has no room left around it. Its clarity hemorrhages. It floods us, and we fall. At the moment of collapse, one falls fully clothed, if one is fully clothed, and nothing else functions but one's grief. The illogic of the fall, despite what novels say, has little to do with sex and everything to do with a blow so violent, though no one seems to have wielded it. In each instance, we're buckling. I first noticed the theorist's decades before, in my second semester of college. From our library's upper floors, having exited the elevator, about to enter the stacks, I looked down into an atrium filled with tired couches. Corkboards covered with announcements and posters stretched the length of the wall. Handwritten requests for rides to Albany, Boston, or New York were push-pinned beside some club's rehearsal schedule or some other's call for members. Posters invited us to go abroad, to study or teach English in Japan or China. Swiftly and with determination, someone was ripping a number of these posters off the boards. They turned briefly to the room, as if daring interruption. What had offended them? Was this their financial aid job? Somehow, I didn't think so. I took the stairs slowly back to the ground floor, made my way to the trash, where I pulled out one and then another poster. What the posters had in common were bikinied women, as if that was all that was on offer. I laughed my enthusiastic applause and entered the quad, hoping to see the theorist on the lawn. From the library's entrance, I scanned the green. They were gone. I felt disappointed. The disappointment was noted. Until then, I'd lived as a hostage whose feelings hindered survival. To feel was to surrender. To play dead on my feet was to make it through the day. Deadpan kept things deadened. But in my escape to college, feelings as a category had to be newly claimed. A three-step process: recognition, identification, and acceptance or rejection. When I could locate and name a feeling, it pleased me. Disappointment? Okay. Pleasure? Oh. I was vigilant in my recognitions. I imagined if I could name each emotion in real time, I would construct the infrastructure of a self who knew how to respond to this world. It was a way to return to myself, one reconnected emotion at a time. Back then, staring at my fellow students in the quad, I felt that the unlocatable one could help me. Later, I likened the action of the theorist pulling each advertisement down to the gestural fists of Tommy Smith and John Carlos in the 1968 Olympics. Their gesture also returned to me at moments as a gentle push. It was the British sociologist Stuart Hall who suggested that after the 1960s, every action would be a revolution. The theorist's hand ripping away paper from the wall reminded me it was stillborn, not to swing out at life. One might act despite the impossibility of change. Nonetheless, I remained slow to action. Childhood memories of being lifted and thrown across a room as the butt exited my lips, or waking into the full weight of someone's pressing one down into breathlessness, or a hand's pressure over a mouth full of no. Of the meaninglessness of words or doors, all were complex always to pass through before knowing when and how to say, I feel, therefore I must do. Or more simply, fuck no. Having lived through the disregard of what I wanted, what I said, and what I knew, the repetition of the theorist's hands quietly saying no, not on my watch, opened doors so firmly closed in my consciousness, I had begun to think of them as walls. Their example framed a window in order to break it. Quiet resistance seemed achievable, within a world shaped by constant assault and disregard. Fall semester my sophomore year, a visiting philosopher so spry he could jump on students' desks during his lectures, taught a class on Hegel. And there, across from me, sat the theorist. Months had passed since the library sighting. Without expecting the moment, I had known it would come. Once in a dance class, the year before, an instructor asked us to convince her that someone we were waiting for had just arrived. "You see them," she kept repeating. "You see them, but they still have to pass through long lines at border control, and only the dedication of your gaze will allow them to locate you in a crowd." I was patient and unwavering. Before long, the theorist turned to me, and for a time we understood ourselves as found. Maybe it was their defense of Antigone against Hegel's heroic but domestic prison, or maybe it was the way their clothes never matched. Because who cares about that shit? Whatever the reason, I immediately felt a sense of safety unknown until then. What the theorist found in me, I'll never know. An audience, maybe. At first, we pretended, like Ismene in Sophocles' play, not to have seen anything painful, mad, or shameful, or dishonorable. We, as strangers, had no sorrows. We were young and in search of knowledge and in love with language and ideas. We read stanzas, dialogues, paragraphs, lyrics, and passages aloud, committing them to memory. We blasted Prince and Tina Turner. We wrote our papers with Nina Simone's Feeling Good playing on repeat. We said, paraphrasing Miles Davis, "If you understood me, you would be me," and thought ourselves joined, but still wholly original. We moved into the same crunchy granola co-op and cooked together. Two Norwegian skiers sacrilegiously left bloody steaks on the kitchen counter, and that struck us as impossibly hilarious. Once we exited the co-op, our own worlds rarely cross. We were seduced by similar arguments that had different majors. We hung with unrelated crowds. Eventually, shanty towns were built on campus to protest apartheid South Africa. The theorists could be found there in cut-off shorts, their Angela Davis t-shirt, and a red baseball cap from the second-hand shop on Water Street. New alliances were formed. In the dining hall, the son of the Shah, one of the Kenyatta sons, two princes from Mauritius, and the theorists argued about political theory. When not contemplating the theorists and their friends across the room, I argued for Maud Gonne, whom Yeats had referred to as a mess of shadows in among school children. Judgments became part of the discourse. It was around this time that the theorists and I thought to collapse. Though I'm pretty sure I wasn't protesting anything more specific than breath itself. For me, collapse was more a recognition than protest. It was a small way to communicate that on the outside, it might seem anything was possible. Inside, less so. For the theorists, it was an escape from all the rest.
Je vais vous lire une traduction des dernières pages du livre. Ce n'est que lorsque j'ai senti le froid humide sur mes joues que j'ai compris. C'est toi qui as fait cela. Ton corps n'a pas été rejeté, il s'est fondu dans le monde. Qu'est-ce qui s'est perdu en lui? C'est perdu en toi. La théoricienne et moi avons fini par heurter tout ce qui est gelé. Nous avons perdu notre nous. Aucune vie ne peut se permettre cette perte. Toute vie est cette perte. La perte transforme ce qui peut être imaginé. La perte nous situe au sud de nous-mêmes, dans les incendies et les inondations, dans les sauterelles, dans les baleines échouées, dans les paysages de migration, de désespoir, sans alternative pour recommencer. Elle nous situe au cœur de la tempête, au moment même où nous reprenons pied dans notre survie. Au milieu du chaos et de la terreur, tout ce que l'on imagine est flou, insaisissable et terriblement bruyant, moite et froid. Il y a la soif et tant de peur, il y a la peur de la soif. Nos mains sont vidées de leur promesse de tenir. N'étions-nous pas censés réduire l'impact, nous rattraper, amortir la chute? Quand ces mains sont-elles devenues trop occupées à briser pour se tendre? Quelque part, tapis en nous, résidait le désir d'échapper à la perte, si bien que nous limitions le périmètre des personnes pouvant être tenues, ceux que nous pouvions tenir, le travail du soin, sans concession. Autrefois, nous aurions peut-être appelé cette étreinte l'hospitalité. Nous n'avons jamais été librement nous-mêmes et nous le sommes encore moins aujourd'hui. L'avenir survient ici et survient là, en nous tapotant l'épaule. Les causalités informent et donnent forme. Nous nous retournons, non pas pour voir, mais pour ne pas être. Ce sont là les reconnaissances. Parfois, la maison brûle. Peut-être que c'est seulement alors que nous cessons de réagir par le refus, le rejet, le renoncement, etc., jusqu'à ce que nous comprenions que nous sommes tous les morts sans sépulture. Quelle que soit notre posture, nous sommes tous parmi les décombres. Laisser entrer un autre suffirait peut-être pour se remettre debout et devenir ingouvernable. En fin de compte, c'est ce qui est fait. Parfois, nous devons agir. Parfois, nous devons légiférer pour nous-mêmes. Parfois, donner, c'est renoncer à quelque chose, même si c'est l'avenir. Parfois, il faut tenter l'impossible. Ne le savons-nous pas ? Nous nous sommes effondrés dans notre moi réel, notre moi du XXIe siècle, ce moi qui englobe tout ce qui nous définit en tant qu'être humain. La fragilité, la résilience, la vulnérabilité, l'épuisement, la peur, les échecs, les humiliations, les luttes, la confusion. Désormais, la sortie et l'effondrement sont à demeure. Nous devrons finir par accepter l'idée que c'est ici, dans la dévastation, dans le manque, dans le néant, que la vie a lieu. Les sentiments souterrains ont besoin d'espace pour suivre leur libre recours dans le glitch que la théoricienne a un jour décrit comme une interruption au milieu d'une transition. Mais à quoi mène cette transition? Au jamais plus? Dans la fiction des faits, nous prenons conscience de notre responsabilité vis-à-vis de ce qui est visible, vis-à-vis de toute autre personne présente. En réalité, nous ne faisons rien de cette prise de conscience. Ne pas se laisser submerger, ainsi que nous le comprenons, c'est rester occupé par notre prochain souffle. Chaque expiration envoie dans l'atmosphère son souhait d'un jour supplémentaire. Et on peut, jusqu'à un certain point, accomplir des choses avant que le temps ne nous voie exister dans le temps avec tout ce qui advient. J'imagine qu'une fois que le temps aura tourné son attention vers nous, un par un, chacun d'entre nous atteindra un plafond de clarté où nos limites nous apparaîtront de manière flagrante, des limites qui, en fin de compte, nous ont créées. La fragilité, la peur, l'effroi sont illusoires, jusqu'à ce qu'ils ne le soient plus. Et ensuite, la fiction de qui nous pourrions être en temps de crise, tandis que les corps s'accumulent autour de nous, étouffe l'air entre nous malgré la rhétorique optimiste de la continuité. Tout va bien se passer, vous en sortez bien. Les gens sont formidables. Mais les paroles n'ont d'importance que si les vies ont de l'importance. Parfois le vide se tourne vers nous, un léger sourire aux lèvres, à la bouche. Mais putain, fais quelque chose. Alors nous couvrons ma propre bouche de nos mains, tout en nous étouffant avec nos défenses, nos protections, nos boucliers. Et cela nous fait monter les larmes aux yeux. Nous nous demandions comment nous ressentirions notre nouveau chagrin mondial. Ce qui a disparu a disparu. La capitulation est la capitulation. La honte est la honte. La brutalité est la brutalité. Il n'y a pas de confusion à ce sujet. Cela, nous l'avons construit. La triangulation nous ramène sur le divan. À quoi pouvons-nous survivre? Pas à ta perte, ni à toi qui es perdu, pas à la perte autour de toi, pas à cette perte qui abonde. À quoi peut-on survivre? Pas à la perte et à la perte. Même si ce monde tente de nous convaincre que tout peut être remplacé artificiellement, intelligemment, même si ceux qui nous entourent succombent, tombent à côté du divan, sont terrassés, tu existes encore et toujours, toi. La question de savoir ce qui constitue l'amour nous a permis de placer notre espoir dans le temps. Comment comprendre l'amour face à ta perte? Comment avons-nous pu rester les bras croisés, envahis l'intrigue, même maintenant que le temps annonce la perte? À quoi pouvons-nous survivre? Pas à ta perte ou au toi perdu, pas à la perte autour de toi, pas à la perte qui abonde. À quoi peut-on survivre? Pas à ta perte ou à la perte en toi. À quoi peut-on survivre? Pas à la perte et à la perte. Nous essayons de reprendre pied en atterrissant, sans tendre la main à qui que ce soit. C'est déchirant, vraiment.
It was not until I felt cold dampen my cheeks that I understood. You did this. Your body was not thrown off. It flowed into the world's refusals. What's lost in it? What loss in you? The theorist and I finally collided with what's frozen. We have lost our we. We are not. No living allows for this loss. All living is this loss. Loss morphs what can be imagined. Loss locates us south of us in the fires and floods, in the locusts, in the beach whales, in the landscape of migration, desperation, without alternatives with which to begin again. It locates us dead center of the storm, even as we step back into our seeming survival. Amidst chaotic dread, every imagined thing is cloudy, ungraspable, and so very loud and sweaty and cold. There is thirst and so much fear. There is fear in the thirst. Our hands are emptied of their promise to hold. Weren't we meant to reduce impact, catch ourselves, break the fall? When did these hands become too busy breaking to extend? Somewhere, crouched within us, resided the wish to escape, bearing the loss, and this meant we were limiting the scope of who could be held, who we could hold. When did these hands become too busy breaking to extend? Once we might have called the hold hospitality, we were never freely we, and now we are less so. The future happens here and happens there while tapping us on the shoulder. Causalities in form and form. We turn around not in order to see, but in order to not be. These are the recognitions. Sometimes the house burns down. Perhaps only then do we stop reacting with refusal, rejection, renunciation, and so on, until it's understood we are all the unburied dead. No matter our posture, we are all among the rubble. To let another in could be all it takes to stand up in oneself, and become ungovernable. In the end, that is the thing done. Sometimes we must do something. Sometimes we must legislate for ourselves. Sometimes to give is to give something up, even if it is the future. Sometimes impossible things must be tried. Don't we know this? We have collapsed into an actual self, our 21st century self, this self that enveloped all that names us human. The fragility, the resilience, the vulnerability, the exhaustion, the fear, the compassion, the failures, the indignities, the struggles, the culpability, the bewilderment. Now both the exit and the collapse are in residence. Eventually, we will need to embrace the belief that it is here, in the devastation, in the lack, with nothing. It is here, in the nowhere, where living takes place. Subterranean feelings need space to run wild in the glitch, which the theorist once described as an interruption amid a transition. But what is the transition to? Nevermore. In the fiction of the facts, we come to know ourselves as responsible to what's seen, to whoever else is there. In reality, we do nothing with the knowing. Not to be overwhelmed as we understand it is to remain busy with our next breath. Each exhale sends its wish out into the atmosphere for another day. And one can, to a point, get things done before time sees one there, existing in step with all that is happening. I imagine that once time turns its attention our way, one at a time, each of us will reach a ceiling of clarity in which our limits exist starkly before us. Limits which, in turn, it turns out, created us. Fragility, fear, fright is illusionary until it isn't. Then what? The fiction of who we might be in a crisis, hemorrhaging as near and far, high and low, here and there, now and then, the bodies adding up around us, extinguishing the air between us, despite the cheery rhetoric of continuance. Everything will be all right. You are doing so well. People are amazing. But the utterances don't matter unless the living make them matter. On occasion, the void turns to us, a slight smile ghosting its lips, and mouths, for fuck's sake, do something. Then we cover our own mouth with our hands while choking on defenses, protections, shields, and this waters our eyes. We were wondering how our new global grief would feel. Gone is gone. Capitulation is capitulation. Shame is shame. Brutality is brutality. Slaughter is slaughter. There is no confusion here. We built this. The triangulation returns us to the couch. What can we survive? Not the loss of you and the lost you. Not the loss around you, not this loss that abounds. What can be survived? Not the loss and the loss. Even as the world attempts to convert us to the belief that everything can be repaired, revived, replaced artificially, intelligently, even as those around us succumb, miss the couch, are floored, there exists you, time after time, you. The question of what constitutes love allowed us to place hope in time. how to understand love given the loss of you. How could we have stood by overtakes the plot even now as time forecasts the loss. What can we survive? Not the loss of you and the lost you, not the loss around you, not the loss that abounds. What can be survived? Not the loss of you and the loss in you. What can be survived? Not the loss and the loss. We are trying to gain footing by landing without putting our hands out to any other. It's heartbreaking, truly.
Merci beaucoup à nos lecteurs et lectrices ce soir. Claudia, Mia, Gabriel, Alma, Olivier. Merci beaucoup à l'atelier Michael Woolworth et toute son équipe. Merci à vous tous et toutes d'avoir été là. Ne partez pas. Nous vous invitons à poursuivre la conversation autour d'un verre et même d'un buffet. Je vous annonce juste la prochaine lecture qui aura lieu le mardi 14 octobre. Et nous entendrons Naomi Shahib Nai. Bonne soirée à tous. Merci.